Hey there, and welcome to Season 4 of Stories Unveiled, the podcast where we believe every story has the power to inspire, connect, and transform. Whether it's through the mundane moments or the life-altering tragedies, we highlight God's story on display in our lives. Each episode, our guests get real and dive into their own personal journey, where we hold hardship in one hand and hope in the other, while we explore Jesus in the messy middle. I'm Ashley Sears, and I am so glad you're here. Hey, it's Ashley here at Stories Unveiled. Before we dive into this episode, I want to personally invite you to our upcoming annual Fall Women's Conference. This is your chance to experience the power of real, life-changing stories, just like the ones here on every episode, brought to life in person. Join us for a full day of hope, inspiration, and connection, featuring incredible regional and local speakers and a moving keynote session, plus amazing uplifting worship. Connect with amazing community partners and browse our curated vendor booths. Don't miss this opportunity to gather, grow, and be encouraged by stories of hope at this fall's Stories Unveiled conference. Register now at storiesunveiledconference.com. We can't wait to see you there. Danielle O'Malley has a servant's heart. Whether she is advocating for foster youth or senior citizens, or she is making some amazing cupcakes, Danielle is a self-proclaimed, sleep-deprived hot mess that one day dreams of being an editor. But even on her worst day, she is a fighter for truth and for health. Her story is one of turbulence, but also gratitude and hope. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to dive right in, but before we do, I want to kind of address real fast. I initially asked you to do this podcast episode a while back. And what was your initial response?
No.
You did. And I told you it was okay to say no, but you did say no. Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about why you said no.
I mean, the first thing is I just feel like I was like, my story doesn't matter. Like, I'm not worthy of sharing my story. I think that I was worried about like people from the past judging me or being like, she hasn't actually changed or, I think that I had to like search myself because there was like a lot of self-doubt too of like, my story doesn't matter. There's nothing worth sharing.
And was there a little piece of you that was like, my story is also not packaged pretty. It's not done.
Oh, yeah.
And none of our stories are done.
Right.
But to some degree, you're still in the midst of some of your stuff. And so was there a little bit of like, who am I?
Yeah. Well, and I think I said that too. I think I was like, well, like, I don't really think that I have authority because it's not tied up or like, because I still struggle. Like, who am I to say like this is something to have hope for if it's like, well, but you still struggle. So where's your authority in that? So yeah.
That's super honest of you. And yet I appreciate that you did it nonetheless. Now tell me why you decided when you called me that day and you were like, okay, so I'll do it.
I think part of me felt like there were like some signs like from the Lord, someone else like very random in my life had asked me to be on their podcast. And I was like, well, no, like I said no to Ashley. No. Yeah. But then it was like, well, why am I being asked like so close to like to share my story? So that felt like maybe like a Holy Spirit prompting. And then like also kind of realizing like much like if we wait to be perfect to like be Christian, then like it's never going to happen. So it's like, I don't know that my story will ever be tied up in a pretty little bow. So then it's like, well, then I'm never going to share my story. And like learning that there's still value in the fact that like I have to surrender every single day or like it's hard every single day, but that doesn't mean that like there's not room for stories like that. So I think I just realized like, oh, there is value in this.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And so I want to dive into kind of this unwrapped story that we're talking about. And so kind of where I want to start is you have struggled with an eating disorder for a good portion of your life. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What specifically is your eating disorder, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind. So my diagnosis is anorexia purging subtype.
Okay.
So I'm like, don't know, like there's people have anorexia, they have bulimia, they have a combination of both. There's ARFID, binge eating disorder, like
so many things.
Yeah, but mine is always leaned towards anorexia, and then I did struggle a lot with purging at certain points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the first time you realized this was an issue, like you had an eating disorder, whether it was your diagnosis or you in yourself was like, this is a problem.
I think those are like very separate.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So part of me thinks that like even when I was like a teenager, I like kind of knew, and I remember, you know, like learning about eating disorders in health class, and I was like, I probably have that. But then I was like, no.
Yeah.
And then I was actually in the Navy, and I was like meeting with some doctor, and she was like, you're going to treatment. And I was like, treatment for what? And she was like, an eating disorder. And I was like, what? And then like a week later, I was at a treatment center, and I remember when I got there, I was like, I don't have a problem. Like, I don't need to be here. Like, and also like some of these people, like it was their third or their fourth time there, or they were like older. Like, I think there was a woman there that was probably in her 50s or 60s. And I was like, that is not going to be me. Like, one and done.
Yeah.
And then my 23rd day there, I was like, oh my gosh, I have an eating disorder. And I remember like I cried like all day.
And it was a 30-day treatment program?
I was there I did like inpatient, which was in the hospital, and then partial. And I remember it was like 75 days total.
Oh, okay.
I think I spent like 45 or 50 inpatient, and then the rest partial, where you're like there all day, but you like sleep. I was at a hotel, but like you sleep at home at night. So yeah, it was my 23rd day there. I was like, oh my gosh, I have an eating disorder. And then it was like retrospectively, I can look back and see like where it started. But yeah, I really didn't like know, or I like lived in denial for a very long time.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about, because how old were you approximately?
21.
21?
Yeah.
And so you have lived, and even though you had your eating disorder prior to that was just kind of the wake up moment of like, oh, yeah, I can see now that this is an issue. But was it a one and done?
No, it wasn't. So retrospectively, I probably started having a disordered relationship with food when I was like 12. Okay. But then I have memories as early as 5, like measuring my stomach or thinking that I was fat. Like I've thought I was fat since I was 5. Like I remember like trying to play on like the exercise machines in my grandma and granddad's garage, and I would like grab onto the side of my stomach and like compare it to like maybe like the door frame or something that like was tangible. Yeah. And I remember like always having this desire to like be the smallest. And I have like one really vivid memory. This is kind of a tangent. This is not answering your question, but like I have a vivid memory that's so random of like a ball got stuck up somewhere high in like the gym in like PE class, and the teacher, we had to have been like 7 or 8, was like, oh, I need one of the smallest girls. And he like picked up a different girl to like lift up to like grab this ball. And I remember being like, I'm not the smallest, like
devastated,
like inside. And I didn't even know like where that came from. But those are some of like my earliest memories of like not being satisfied with like the size of my body, or like wanting it to be a certain way. And I don't know where that came from. But as far as one and done, no. I've been in some sort of a treatment program 5 times over the last, the first one I was like 21, and the last one I was 31. So over a 10-year period, 5 different times.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about this correlation too with you in like your mental health and your eating disorder, and how that has affected you like through your adulthood.
I mean, I think it's certainly like been intertwined with my identity a lot, in like various levels. I like definitely like a co-occurring diagnosis would be anxiety. I definitely deal with a lot of anxiety. I've dealt with situational depression as a result of the eating disorder, but I mean, I think it's like permeated every single area of my life. Yeah.
So I'm actually glad that you said, so it's permeated every area of your life. Now, you were a Christian walking through this, right? Like, and you went to church at one point, I think, was like really involved in the church that you were attending. And because it's permeated every area, I'm assuming it also greatly affected your community.
Oh, yeah.
And building a community at church and church involvement. Talk to me a little bit about the difficulty around church and this specific area of your life.
Oh, I mean, there's been a lot of church hurt. And I think that if I wasn't taught or like given the foundation of like God's goodness, that I certainly would still not be a Christian. Like there were times where I was like, if this is what Christians represent, like, I don't want to be a part of it. Like, they are mean, they are judgmental. Like, I was involved in a church where I was serving, and then it was like, well, when I started struggling with the eating disorder really badly, it was like, you're not allowed to serve anymore. And I think part of me, on one hand, like, when I can like zoom out and retrospectively, like, I understand, like, you know, if someone's entrenched in alcoholism, maybe they like shouldn't necessarily be serving. And I was like, serving in youth ministry, it was something that gave me purpose, and it was like little kids, like Sunday school. So I'm like, it's not contagious. Like, I'm not going to preach anorexia to these 7-year-old babies, you know? So I remember being like very hurt and feeling very ostracized and felt very unwanted within the church, or like there wasn't a place for me. And especially like, I went to a few different like charismatic churches where then they're laying hands, and then it's like, I'm not instantly healed. There must be something wrong with me, or like maybe God doesn't love me, or I'm doing something wrong. Like, and then also like, well, do I like pretend to be healed to appease these people? Or am I honest? But then if I'm honest, then I'm admitting that I'm a terrible Christian. Because God didn't instantly heal me the way that they prayed for. Like, sorry, your prayer failed, you know?
Or you don't want it enough.
Like, you don't want it enough, or, you know, you need to pray harder. I'm like, that's like, okay, well, you pray harder. Like, you know.
It's funny because that pray harder mentality, I think, permeates so many struggles. I know that Asher has dealt with that in his pornography addiction, in the way of like, well, you still struggle with this? Then like pray it away. And that just doesn't always work, or there's hard work that goes into struggles and pain, and you know, to redeem that and to heal from that. And so is God capable? Yes,
absolutely.
I believe that 100%. And that's just not always the story that God writes on people's lives. He doesn't walk around healing people that ask, you know. And that's the Bible too, like, you know. So church, there was a lot of church hurt, and I'm assuming you ended up at one point leaving or finding another church. Also at one point you ended up moving across the country, right? And how did that decision in moving play into just where you were at in your addiction and mentally? Because during that time is kind of when, right before that is when you and I met. And I feel like because we've had a couple, let me back up. We've had a couple instances where we've met, I don't even know what you would call our initial relationship, like mentor, like,
I
kind
think,
of what how we were first introduced, you had started coming to my church at the time. And when you ended up, I think, ultimately making the decision to move across the country, I don't think you and I were speaking.
I don't think we were either. Yeah.
Tell me, and this will be interesting, but I want you to tell me from your perspective, because then I can share a little bit. We've had a bit of a tumultuous relationship. A tumultuous ride over the last, gosh, how many years has it been?
I think at least 10.
Yeah.
Because I think that your youngest was like little.
Yeah.
And I mean, all your kids are teens or adults now. So I mean, like they were little.
So I would say, 10 years, we've had a bit of a tumultuous ride. Tell me from your perspective, where some of the breakdown happened and like what our deal kind of was.
And like then or now, like pre-therapy or post-therapy?
No, then.
Yeah, I mean like then at the time, I think like now I can look back and be like, wow, I was the Tasmanian devil. I was a very toxic person, like, you know, and we've talked about that. But then I think I was so desperate for like someone to like understand like how chaotic it was inside of my head.
Yeah.
And like so desperate to be understood that it caused a lot of turmoil. And I think that I think there were times where like you were trying to say something encouraging to me, but what you said versus what I heard or read on a text message were very different.
Yeah.
So then I would freak out and be like, you don't care about me. Like, you don't understand. Like, I think was a lot of times like what it boiled down to, or like, times where it felt like, you know, and we've talked about this, like you would say something that was well-meaning, but I interpreted it very differently as like maybe like an accusation of like, like that you never said pray harder, but maybe other things where it was like, you don't hate it enough. And I'm like, what do you mean?
I have said those words.
Yeah. And I was like very hurt, you know, at certain points. But I think I think at the time I just was so desperate to like be understood or to like feel loved or to feel like someone like was there and was going to like love me through it and not like abandon me in like the midst of my struggle.
Which is what you had experienced.
Oh yeah.
In other churches. And the situation in which you came to our church was a mutual person in our lives. And you and I started meeting and discussing just some struggles and some church hurt and how you didn't really trust church people, you know, Christians or whatever.
It came with all of my baggage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I so wanted to be different than what you had experienced. And the more I got to know you, and I think the more I saw like your pain and things that you had struggled with, not just in church, but also your eating disorder. And like you said, I don't know if you were in therapy actively at that point. But I just think we did this because there came to be a point where, I mean, I think it was maybe some unhealth in you.
Absolutely.
And some insensitivity and ignorance in me. I have dealt with addiction. I have dealt with especially like pornography and sex addiction. And that's my world, you know, dealing with in my marriage and my husband. And so I oftentimes would try and equate it to what you were dealing with as a way to relate, as a way to be able to somehow get on common ground. And I think a lot of times that ended up backfiring because while some things can parallel, they're not the same.
Right.
And well-meaning. And I think that that's really important to say too. Like there's so many well-meaning believers, well, people in general, but just Christians in the church that approach things that they're not equipped to.
Right.
I was not equipped to lead you in the way I think you were expecting or hoping. And instead of just owning that and saying like, I can't be what this is and navigating maybe some other type of relationship, then there would be this, well, you just don't hate it enough or you just don't, you know, whatever. And so what that created was huge turmoil. a broken relationship. Like we didn't speak for a long time. That's when you ended up moving across the country. And I think we've had a couple times of not speaking.
I think twice.
Yeah.
There might have been like a third one that was like not as big of a deal, but there were like definitely like two major ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's also funny how they felt so big at the time, and now we're like, I don't really remember.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is now 10 years, you know, kind of into this, I mean, we've been talking and had a relationship for a while now, and how different this is.
Yeah.
And this feels, I think that there's a lot more health, like under your belt. And I think you recognize some things I've owned, I think a lot of my part in it. And it's okay to say, like, I don't think I'm equipped to handle this piece,
Right.
or I don't want to step into this, you know? And I think that that's okay.
Absolutely. I think if more people along the way would have been willing to just say that, it probably would have served me more than, you know, and one church I think of in particular, I felt lied to all the time because it was like, yeah, we're going to be here to support you or this. And then it was like, you know, I reach out and then like call declined or like, I'm too busy. But then like the Instagram post of like, they're out with a bunch of people like that I thought were my friends, like things like that. And it's like, I remember being like, just be honest with me.
Yeah.
Like, just be honest with me. And then also I think that I was in a place where I, like I said, was so desperate for like love that like sometimes I would be kind of smothering, or like I wouldn't consider, like I never thought about like, oh, like she's at home with her husband and 3 kids, you know, like no, just answer my phone call, like, you know, like help me or like pull me out of this chaos. And I think that there was like, not an expectation to be fixed, but like an expectation to be rescued. Like, oh, well, if you're a Christian, you're supposed to be able to rescue me.
And in pastoral leadership, like that in the position I was at the church too, like, oh great, she can help me. So she'll pull me out of this. I'm thinking of one time in particular, and I'm wondering, and I think it was before you left, but you said like, oh, I call, and I didn't even think that it was that you were home with your husband or your kids or, you know, whatever. But how often do, again, well-meaning leaders in the church say like, we want to walk with you through this. We want to help you through this, because I really do feel like that's the heart of like pastoral leadership. And then when the rubber meets the road, how messy that is.
All of the time.
Yeah.
So then I moved to the East Coast, and kind of, you know, brought all of my baggage with me.
As we do.
Yeah. I went into a church, and it definitely like was the Lord. Like I was supposed to go to a different church, and then like got off on the wrong subway. I was in New York, like got off on the wrong subway. And then like my friend met me, and it was like the church that we ended up at, it was like, well, let's just go here. Like their service hasn't started yet. Like it was an acquiescence. And then that particular service, like there was a really powerful message. I went up for prayer after and met, I was like, hey, will you pray with me? Yeah, sure. No problem. She ended up being the women's pastor. And I was like, no,
I don't do this type of relationship.
And she like invited me to her house, and I was like, no, but I went. And I remember having a conversation with her, probably similar to one I had with you, where I'm like, I don't trust church. I don't trust pastors. Like I'm here because I like believe in God and think it's important to go to church, but like, I'm not going to get involved. She was like, okay. And I think she was like kind of the first person who didn't like push up against that, if that makes sense. And also she introduced me to very strict boundaries. And at first I was like, okay, well, I must be in a database somewhere. Like, and it must be like, oh, like if this girl comes to your church, like, you know, the red letter.
Right.
So to speak.
Like you had the asterisk by your name.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like all Christian churches in America knew that if Danielle O'Malley walked into their church, like you were on that list.
Yeah. Like that's how I felt. And I was like, she must know I'm bad. Like, and then I remember at first, like all of the boundaries she put in place, I was like, this is so mean. And then slowly but surely it was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. You know, it was like...
The boundaries can be good.
Yeah, because I felt like there were expectations and like she had expectations of me and I felt safe having expectations with her because I knew she would follow through. So then if it was like, okay, we're going to meet it on this day at this time, then we did. Like you can text me from this hour to this hour and like, this is what I can help you with. And then it was like, oh, like, well, maybe not all Christians are bad or maybe not all boundaries are bad. And, she and her husband ended up baptizing me and I waited 9 years to get baptized. Yeah. Because there had been also like so many expectations placed on like, oh, you'll be instantly healed if you get baptized. And I was terrified of that. Not just being instantly healed, but of not being instantly healed. Yeah. Like, okay, well, if I
what a disappointment.
Go through with that and then I'm not instantly healed, like, then God for sure hates me. And I am not interested in being a Christian.
And then like, there's that juxtaposition of then like, should you be getting baptized?
Right.
If you feel like that's how you're going to feel after, then God must really hate me because that's so far from the truth. Right. You know, it's like this revolving door.
So learning like, no, like there shouldn't be any expectation. Like it's a declaration of your faith and that's it. And like, whether you're instantly healed or not, like God still loves you. So yeah, I feel like that was the first time that I like started to build like healthy relationships with people, especially church people. And like I chilled out like, because it was like, oh, this isn't so scary because there's expectations. And that, like, I'm someone who thrives off of boundaries. But I feel like that, at first it was really scary and really intimidating and felt like I was red listed somewhere. And then in the long run, it like has served me so much. Yeah.
So you eventually left New York and came back to where your family is, which is Boise, Idaho. And you go to church and you are engaged and like you have built a life and you were hit with some pretty crazy health issues over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's been like 21 months.
Okay, so just under 2 years. Tell me about those health issues and how they have played a crazy mind game on you with your history, with your anorexia and those sorts of things.
So I've been diagnosed with like long COVID. I got COVID for the third time. And then like went on an incredible family vacation, came back, was really sick. I was the only one out of like 18 of us who was really sick. And then I kept getting sicker. And it was just like back to back to back of these different things. And like eventually ended up on a feeding tube, which any other time in my life that I had a feeding tube, it was like punishment in an eating disorder treatment center. Right. Because I like wasn't being compliant.
So you were no stranger to a feeding tube.
No.
Because of your struggles in your past. And now you're on a feeding tube at this point, and it's not a punishment. It's because your body is breaking down because you've been so sick. What a mind game.
Oh my gosh.
Is that?
It was, well, first of all, there were like all of the fears of like, weight gain came back and like what's gonna happen with my body, and also feeling like, oh my gosh, I've done something wrong. Like yeah, I've described it. I mean, I've described it to you, but also to my team as like walking a tightrope without a harness. And I'm like a tightrope across the Grand Canyon. Like, you know, it just feels like at any moment I could fall one way or the other and be in a catastrophic relapse. Like, it's like, you know, you talked about relating with like Asher's porn addiction, and it's like eating disorders are so much more complicated because you have to be around food.
Yeah.
Unlike any other addiction, there's absolutely parallels, but you don't have to be around the substance or the alcohol.
But you need to nourish yourself.
Yeah. So it just has made it so much more complicated. And it's like, also I'm like, I've worked so hard to have a positive relationship with food, and it wasn't perfect, but it was like, I finally got to like a really, I would say like stable place where I was really confident in my recovery to be like, okay, cool. Now my body like
is failing me.
Right. And rejects food. Like, you know, so my stomach has stopped relaxing and expanding to accommodate food. So it's like, you know, it's not enjoyable anymore. And I think I wrote in my journal once, I said, like, I used to love food. I was just afraid of it. Now I'm not afraid of it, but I hate it. Yeah. And it's like,
because it hurts you.
Yeah. Because it's like debilitating and it's not enjoyable. Yeah. And, yeah, it's just been like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that like this is where I would end up, especially after working so hard at recovery. And even like feeling or wondering like, is my body punishing me for all the years I punished it? Yeah. Like, you know, do I deserve this? Is this something?
Yeah, or is God punishing me?
Right.
Like, he allowed this to happen because of what I did.
Yeah. There's been all of those thoughts, or being, again, like even that like healing tangent of like, well, like, why not me? You know, but also like, but why me? Like, I don't need to be instantly healed. Like, if that's not like his will. And also there are of course moments of like, why God, why? Yeah. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. Like, and those like old feelings of like, well, should I pray harder? Am I not reading the right version of the Bible? Yeah. Like, if I read this version instead, then would I like magically be okay? Yeah. So yeah, a lot of like the parallel thoughts. And then even like, how do I ask people for support in this season without being toxic or like reverting back to old behaviors? Yeah. You know, it's all a lot. Well,
and while your eating disorder and those things and the support you needed then, and your health struggles and stuff going on and the support you need, can feel related, they're not. Right. Like, they're not related at all. And yet you're like, man, I feel like I'm here again, just in a very different way. Right. And needing different support that still somehow feels tied.
Oh yeah.
So okay, so you were on a feeding tube because your body was not, it was rejecting food essentially. But you needed to nourish. So you're on a feeding tube, and that, you said, has been about 21 months. Tell me just a little bit about like that, the last 21 months.
Yeah. So, it was supposed to be 4 weeks of total gastric rest, turned into 14 and a half weeks. It came out briefly. It was in my nose, and it bypassed my stomach and went straight into my intestines. So my stomach didn't have to do any work. Yes. And then that lasted about 3 weeks, and then it was back in. And then eventually they moved it into my stomach, called a GJ tube. So that's still like, the J part means jejunum, which means it goes into my intestines. And then just recently, within like the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I had a surgery to move it to just a J tube. Okay. Because we think that it pushing up against my abdominal wall, like the stomach part, was causing other issues. And yeah, I think I told you the other day that I feel like that, like whack-a-mole, or like that game where like you hit a light and it's like, okay, like this light, like we address this and then a new one pops up. Like, that's how it's felt with my health the last 21 months. And then, after the J tube went in, not being able to run it at the rate. So like, that's how fast the formula goes in.
Right.
Like not being able to run it at the rate that was needed, to like sustain my nutrition. And a part of that in the beginning is like normal.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, okay, like we keep trying to increase it and it's not working. And my body held out for a while and then it just totally crashed. And then I ended up in the hospital. I was there for 10 days. Then they put me on TPN, which is like probably the most elemental form of nutrition that you can get. Like it just goes through a central line directly into your veins. It's like, it can't get more broken down than that. And then like slowly trying to like reintroduce tube feeds so that my body can tolerate that, so that I can like have a quality of life.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
Is to have some sort of quality of life. And then like that has been another piece that I know you and I have talked about, where I'm like, at what point do I just say like, all right, like let's let nature. Like let's, if this is, and not knowing what God's will is. Like, is God's will for me to like do every single intervention and keep going and keep fighting, or is God's will for me to just be like, okay, like let's just see what happens and like let nature. Yeah. But that's not a conversation anyone wants to have or entertain or think about.
Well, yeah.
So
none of your loved ones want to, and I'm sure to some degree you don't really want to deal with it either.
No.
But right now you are on the TPN with a PICC line, and you also have a feeding tube that is kind of dormant at the moment, correct?
We have like the last 2 weeks been slowly reintroducing feeds.
Okay. So yeah. So trying to reintroduce, and the goal is that you can get back to normal, whatever normal is, right? But like eating at some point, in addition to figuring out allergies and so many other things that you potentially have going on. That's the goal. And the reality is nobody really knows.
What that's there's still so many unknowns with like long COVID, and it's like, how does that impact the body? And in certain people, it's like activated every autoimmune. And I mean, you've been around, and like my hands will flare and my face will flare, and it's like, you know, diagnosis of lupus or dermatomyositis or like all these different things. And then like most recently, I already can't have gluten or dairy. Now my dietitian is like, well, maybe you're also allergic to eggs. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't have alcohol anymore. I can't have caffeine anymore. I can't have dairy.
You have stripped away everything.
Yeah, I'm like, eggs, I really like eggs. Like,
that's how I felt when I was told I can't have dairy or gluten anymore. And then I was like, you just took away all of my food groups, everything that I eat.
And so I'm like, I'm fine with the dairy and the gluten. I'm not okay with the eggs. Like, but also it's like, okay, if that's ultimately what it takes so that I don't feel like garbage all the time. Like, then that's what we'll do. But yeah, like the goal, the dream is obviously to like be back in a place where like I can sit down and have a normal meal with people where like I'm actually eating, and then I'm not a mess after for whatever amount of time.
Talk to me just for a second about this idea of let nature. I mean, the reality of that is like, I mean, if you can't
starve to death.
That's like heavy. And for you to sit here and say that those are things that you've had to face and really like wrap your head around. Like everybody's faced with their mortality, everybody, because we're all going to die.
Right.
And most people don't have to face it like this, where you have a very real, like, I don't know what's going to happen. So where does your hope to like, well, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again today?
Well, I think part of me is like, I simply don't have a choice. You know?
That's fair.
And I think that there is like a part of me that's like, well, if I like give up, because that kind of is like what it would be. Like, is that trusting God? Like, and kind of still believing like, well, if there's still interventions out there, then like
my job is to walk through the door.
Like I have to keep going.
Yeah.
But I mean, the first time I had the conversation with my mom, it was like, we will do everything. And I'm like, but you're not the one that it's happening to.
Yeah.
You're not the one that's going through everything. Like, and also I can't imagine, like, I'm not a mom, but like, if I was a mom, I can't imagine getting that phone call from my kid.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, we're going to do everything. Like, so I think that, and like what I've said to a lot of people is like, I have a really good life.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have quality of life all the time right now. And I like struggle with feeling like I have to choose like, for energy expenditure, like what am I going to do? But overall, like there are like you said, I have a fiance, like God bless him. I was seemingly healthy when we started dating.
Yeah.
And the fact that like he's stuck through me through all of this is incredible. But like, I have a dog and I love being a dog mom. I love being Aunt Danielle and like all these other things where it's like all of that just like simply is like, I don't want to like give up on all of those things. And it does like, it does kind of feel like giving up.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of sad because it like, if it was another disease, maybe it wouldn't be viewed as that way.
Right.
But it's also just like, well, like the Pastor Bianca, like if you're not dead, God's not done. Like, so just
you still got breath in
remembering
your lungs.
like, yeah, okay, like I guess I'll keep going. So part of it is not that profound. Part of it is like, I simply don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And part of it is like, well, I want to.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be here. I want to keep going. Like, there are things like, even on like the really hard days that are good.
Yeah.
So back in 2019, it was September 2019, one of my best friends gave me a gratitude journal for my birthday. And it was just like, write 3 things a day. And I remember like being told all the time, like, gratitude changes things, gratitude changes things. Well, like unbeknownst was like, okay, what, less than 6 months later, like the world was going to come to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And I'm like living on the East Coast in like the peak of COVID. And I'm like, oh my gosh, gratitude does change things.
Yeah.
Cause I still like now every year I buy one for myself. It's like my stocking stuffer to myself. And just the 3 things a day. And I think that like, I'm like, oh, like that's like the cliche, like it's cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah.
And like, there's always something to be grateful for. Yeah. Like in some days it's benign. I'm like, I'm thankful the sun came out today, or I'm thankful I got to snuggle with my dog. But that has absolutely been a game changer for like my mental health and my physical health, and like maintaining a mindset of like, okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I want to ask you, I usually ask one question at the end of every episode, kind of in reference to everybody's story, like what encouragement would you have for a listener? I'm going to ask you a 2-part question.
Okay.
The first one is, what would you tell somebody listening to this episode who is actively struggling with, I will either say an eating disorder or chronic illness, who just like, it's hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
Because I think even though they're very different, it can still be a similar answer, right?
Yeah.
So what encouragement would you have for somebody that's walking through this?
Get help.
Yeah.
Get a therapist, get a dietitian. Like if you need to go to a treatment center, go to a treatment center, like get a treatment team.
Yeah.
Would be like my very, very first, like,
yeah.
And I think like one of the most beneficial things I learned was like, this is for my team. This is for my friends and family. And like building that like support that's healthy instead of toxic. And I think I'd also just say like, it's really, really hard, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah. The sky's going to stay in the sky.
The sky's going to stay in the sky. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, for the people like me, what wisdom or encouragement do you have for somebody walking alongside somebody struggling? Because it's not like we have the hard part, but it is hard to watch somebody that you care about walk through these things. Like whether you understand them completely or not, it's still really hard. So what would you tell a loved one?
Well, I think you and I both would say like like, know your role, like, and like, let the therapist or the dietitian or the treatment team, like, let them do their part and know that, like, you can't fix them. You can't stop them.
Yeah.
Like, and I think and I can't speak for everyone else, I can only speak for myself, but like, I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be known. I wanted to be told the sky's gonna stay in the sky. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, I didn't need like that struggle of like, just stop it. Or like, you know, like, so I think like, know your lane, like, know what you're capable of and like what you're not. And then also like avoid the power struggle.
Yeah.
And I think something else that like has helped us is me, when I do come to you for support, saying like, hey, can we do Urge 911, which is a skill that is available online, you know, like, but coming and saying like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, and this is what I need from you. Or being able to say, I don't know what I need. I know I just need some sort of support. And it could be as benign as like playing an iPhone game back and forth together, or like as tangible as like, can you pray for me? Or can you tell me like, hey, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But trying to like, me as the person who's struggling, like responsibly say like, hey, this is what I need from you right now, instead of just putting it out there and kind of having an expectation of you to like glue me back together, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you being able to say, I can't.
Yeah, I can't. And we know the one who can, right? Yeah. And to be able to say like, I can't do that. I can pray for you when you can't pray, right? When you don't even feel like doing that. I can just be an ear. I can't, you know, whatever. I think, like you said, know your role is really important.
Yeah.
So.
And then also, like, I think, like, when you brought up, like, we know who can, like, of course God can.
Yeah.
And, like, I believe that with my whole heart.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of well-meaning Christians sometimes would be like, well, maybe this is for you to walk with God, like, alone.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't think either one of us believe that.
Yeah, we need community. We need people.
So I think that for well-meaning Christians to not say that, because that's not true. Like, there are things, yes, I think God need to go to Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Jesus would go alone to talk to God. That's a real thing. Like, we need to take time for ourselves to be with God and to listen to like him. And it was never meant to be like, and go struggle with this by yourself and come back when you're fixed. Correct. Like, so I think that is the other piece, is like, if you are a supporter, please don't do that. Yeah. Please make sure that someone knows, like, yeah, no, like, I'm when I say I'm going to love you through this, I'm going to love you through this. Yeah. And
even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's messy.
Or even, and say like, okay, like this is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, I can get you to the 10K mark. And after the 10K mark, that's beyond my ability. So, like, you need to get a second friend, get a therapist, get someone who can take you from that 10K to the marathon or to the half. You know, maybe at the half you need someone else, but like encouraging, like not just like, I'm going to be your one person. You never did that, but like, but making sure that too, like, that there's not just one person. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. You mentioned just really fast, Urge 911. Is that's an online resource. Any online or great resources for eating disorder help, we will put in the show notes of this episode for anybody that's struggling that maybe didn't know about that or whatever. So anybody listening can go.
There's a great one. I'm going to butcher the name, but I think it's like Charis House, but they have, they're Christian. It's a treatment center based in Florida, but they have, online support groups for people who are struggling, and then also for loved ones. Okay. So definitely, and it's Christian, which is nice. Yeah. And then, Urge 911, game changer.
Yeah, we'll put those links in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here and just your vulnerability. And I know this was not the top of your priority list, but I know that the Lord was like, hey.
Yeah.
And so I just appreciate you.
I appreciate you. And I'm glad I did it. Yeah. And I just sincerely hope that like, even if it helps just one person, just like, okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on the Stories Unveiled podcast. We would love it if you would leave us a rating or a review. If you would like to learn more about Stories Unveiled and our events, go to storiesunveiledconference.com or follow us on Facebook or Instagram at storiesunveiled_. The Stories Unveiled podcast is created in partnership with KTSY and Barefoot Media Ministries. For more encouragement and other podcasts, visit ktsy.org. Have an incredible day and go live unveiled.